Hello and welcome to the Card Combo Show with me, Chocobilly, where I look at weird and wonderful card combinations in the Final Fantasy TCG. Make sure to subscribe and like the video. I've also got a Patreon up now as well, so if you want to help a small growing YouTube channel, then feel free to donate any amount there. I don't have any tiers or anything like that, it's just whatever you can and whatever you want, feel free. Right, let's get to it. Okay, so the cards I'm going to be looking at this week are all Opus 12 cards, and they are Bahamut, Summoner, Cactuar, Ninja, and finally Faris. Okay, so starting with Bahamut. So this is the first summon card that's been made into a forward as well, so really interesting. Standard 3 CP 7k forward. If you have 3 or more fire summons in your break zone, Bahamut gains plus 2000 power, and if you have 7 or more, Bahamut also gains when Bahamut attacks. Deal 5000 damage to all the forwards your opponent controls with 2 S abilities. So, first and foremost, it's worth noting Fang, because Fang simply stipulates the cost required to cast card name Bahamut is reduced by 2, it cannot become 0. So he immediately goes down to becoming a 1 CP forward, which is really good. Opus 12 also had a kind of stipulation on what cast actually means now. It is effectively, if you're paying cost out of hand, that is casting. If you were, hypothetically, to say cast Phoenix, and that would then play Bahamut, Bahamut is being played onto the field, not cast onto the field, so there are differences there. But either way, Bahamut becomes a little 1 CP forward, which is pretty good. Now, you can combine that with something like Muti. So Muti, when he enters the field, you may search for a fire summon out of your hand. Now, even though Bahamut in the game is a summon, he can't search this guy because he's a forward. But what he does do is, when you cast a card named Bahamut, activate Muti. So, Muti will activate when you cast Bahamut onto the field. That, combined with Fang, means that you pay 1 CP with Fang on the field to make Bahamut a 1 CP. You can then reactivate that 1 CP for Muti. So Bahamut effectively becomes a free forward, which is cool. Now, another great card is a little 1-cost summon called Subscribe. It's an EX burst as well, so you really can't get much cheaper than that. It's great value for money, and you and your opponent subscribe to Chocobilly's YouTube channel. I think that's pretty good all in all. Sorry, cheesy, I know. So, Bahamut. Obviously, you can have Bahamut on the field, and you can still cast this summon Bahamut, because when you cast a summon, it doesn't technically come onto the field, it's more just revealed to your opponent. So, yeah, having Bahamut on the field doesn't stop you from casting the same name summons. What's also good is that you can use these summons as S fodder for Bahamut's S ability, so that's pretty good. And also what's interesting is that you can use it, put it into the break zone, that then also counts toward Bahamut's ability as well. So obviously Bahamut's all about the synergy with himself and card names similar to himself. Ifrita, so again, similar to do with the fact that Bahamut loves having fire summons in the break zone. They don't all have to be Bahamut though, so you might just have another couple of this forward in your deck so that you still have the ability to play as S, but then you could have just a buttload of Ifrits or Ifritas in your deck as well, which then synergizes both with Bahamut and Ifrita as well, meaning you're more likely to get more of Ifrita's abilities off. Okay, so Summoner. When you cast a summon, you may put Summoner into the break zone. When you do so, choose one forward, dull it, and freeze it. So she's a nice cost 2 CP backup with a very strong ability for ice, like just to be able to put her into the break zone. She doesn't have to be active or anything, you can just cast a summon, pop, put her in the break zone, and you're good to go with dulling and freezing something. So combining this with something like Une means obviously you cast a summon, you can flicker something, and you can put this back up into the break zone to then freeze something else. It doesn't matter on the element of the summon either, so you can still synergize these two together with even something like a lightning or a fire summon. But we're in Opus 12, so Lock. You could cast, let's say, Glacier Lavalus. You then flick a Lock to make your opponent 2 characters, your opponent discards 1 card from the hand, choose up to 2 characters, dull them and freeze them, so you can freeze 2 characters, make your opponent discard. You could make your opponent discard again with Glacier Lavalus and then dull something out of the way, and you can also use your summoner to dull and freeze something else. That's really, really good value. Terror, again, if you're casting something like Glass, and then using Terror to dull something out of the way, and then you've got Summoner to dull something else out of the way. So you've got so many forms of just cast a summon, loads of stuff happens. Obviously, you can have Terror and Une both on the field at the same time. All these things just work together. That's super offensive. You cast one summon, and boom, everything happens. So, Zalera, the Death Seraph. So, I think Summoner works really, really well with this card, because you cast Zalera, but your opponent's 2 or 3 cost forward may not be dull, but then you can put Summoner into the break zone in response to you casting Zalera. That then means you can make that forward become dull, so that when Zalera then resolves, it will break. Not only that, it could also be a case of Zalera's able to kill a few things on the field that are annoying from your opponent, but it won't hit the 4 cost. But with Summoner on the field, you can put that in the break zone to then also freeze that 4 cost Summoner. That 4 cost forward. So then Zalera and Summoner kinda have a better field presence, as it were. Okay, so Shiva. I mean, this is just kind of an endgame push sort of tech, but choose up to 3 forwards of monsters your opponent controls, dull them and freeze them. You put the Summoner into the break zone as well, you just dull and froze 4 things out of the way. That's, I mean, if your opponent's got 4 forwards, that's pretty crazy already, but they, they could be small and still blocking, so it's good for an endgame push. What's also good about the Summoner is the fact that you can use the Summoner to dull for the CP for Shiva, and then once you've cast Shiva, then put Summoner into the break zone. So don't forget to do that, use your CP wisely. Glaciolabalus, again, it's just a fantastic card to use with it, because you can choose one dull forward, deal it 7k damage and make your opponent discard, and then you can still dull and freeze something out of the way. And the fact that Glass has 2 options already makes it such a strong card, but adding the Summoner into the mix as well, so you effectively get 3 just from casting Glass, wow. And Chocomog. So it wasn't so much Chocomog that it synergizes with, but more the fact that you can cast this little tiny 1 CP summon to then get yourself a Job Moogle or Job Chocobo backup maybe. You then break your backup summoner to dull and freeze one of your opponent's forwards, and then you can play another backup where the summoner was. So it's nice to have that kind of ability of getting yourself a card that you want to play onto your field, whilst also having some offensive effect as well. So there's a lot of good little combos there, but Chocomog was just a nice cheap version, but there's plenty of cards that it works with. Okay, so Cactuar. When Cactuar enters the field, select one of the 2 following actions. Cactuar also becomes a forward with 4,000 power, it doesn't end at the end of the turn, or put Cactuar into the break zone. When you do so, choose 1 forward. Your opponent reveals the top card of their deck. If the revealed card cost is 3 or less, deal it 1,000 damage. If the revealed card cost is 4 or more, deal it 10,000 damage. So when I first saw this card, I thought it would reveal the top card of your deck, but it's actually your opponent's deck. So it's a lot harder to manipulate what you're going to get and how you can make Cactuar deal 10k, but there are kind of some ways. So Kais also came out on Opus 12, so you can look at your opponent's top card and be like, this isn't a 4 CP forward, so I'm just going to slide it, or 4 CP card, to slide it under your opponent's deck, and who knows, hopefully the next card you hit will be 4 CP or higher. But it's also good because it allows you to look at your card as well. But you could also look at the top card in your opponent's deck and it'd be like, that's a 7 cost card. I'm just going to leave that there, and then you cast your Cactuar, deal 10k to something. And if you do get to deal 10k to something, obviously the card stays on top of your opponent's deck, so you play Cactuar, you put it in the break zone, you deal 10k to something, you then dull Mirror to get another Cactuar out of your deck to your hand, you play it onto the field, you deal 10k to something. Or, go a little further down the rabbit hole, you can use Sid Waff. So you play Cactuar, you reveal top card, it turns out to be a 5 CP, you deal 10k to something, and you put it in the break zone, you put Sid Waff into the break zone to bring the same Cactuar back and deal 10k to another forward. So there's a couple of ways here that you can make it so that you can deal 10,000 damage to 2 forwards, and it's really cheap to be able to do it as well. Once you know that the card on top of your opponent's deck is able to affect or able to work with Cactuar, then you can start doing some really value plays. But obviously there are going to be times when it happens when you won't hit the 10k and you just do the little 1. To play Barbarisha, its power gets set to 1, obviously you have to take into account any other buffs happening, but even still, your opponent's forward is 1, you've done 1 with Cactuar, you still killed something, so it's not the end of the world. Ninja. When I first saw this card, I really enjoyed it. It's similar to the Opus X Cloud, where you get to put something away and bring something else onto the field, but I really like this card because it's got a lot of good synergies. First and foremost is Star Sybil. What's good with her is the fact that she can play high cost forwards onto the field, which then can be bounced back to your hand with Ninja to play even higher cost forwards. And she also makes the room, she breaks herself to make room for the Ninja to be able to come in as well. Viking and Layla. So say Viking's just sat there on your field, you play Ninja, Viking goes back to your hand, you draw a card from that effect, and then you can play Layla to get another Viking out of your break zone onto there. Obviously you have to bear in mind you need a Viking in your break zone for that to happen, but even still, just by playing Ninja, you should get 2 cards out of this little combo, which means it's paid for itself, and you've still got 2 forwards there. Pretty good. Tenzen into Braska's Final Aeon. So it's Tenzen is obviously a very tribal samurai card, but Braska does fit in a samurai deck, to be honest. The fact that most samurai effects are on attack, and Braska has a good defensive ability, but also on attack as well. But when Tenzen leaves the field, choose one job samurai or card name samurai of cost 3 or less in your break zone, add it to your hand. So by using Ninja to return Tenzen back to your hand, you still get a card out of that, which refunds the value of Ninja a little bit, but then you can play Braska's Final Aeon onto the field for what is effectively 4 for Ninja. That's really, really good. And obviously the more turns that Tenzen has been on the field as well, if it's revealed more samurais from its end of turn effect, you get more cards to hand, so that kind of pays for Tenzen as well. So good value plays here to be able to recur cards back to your hand and get a very dominant card like Braska's Final Aeon onto the field. Adir and Fusoya. So this is what I was talking about earlier, maybe using something like Star Sybil to be able to play high cost forwards onto the field. Adir obviously can break something depending on how many lightning backups you've got. And say she breaks something, you can then play Ninja to put Adir back in your hand and play Fusoya to then hopefully break something else. And again, when Fusoya enters the field, choose one forward dependent controls, reveal the top 2 cards of your deck, deal it 1000 damage for each CP required to play the revealed cards, add the revealed cards to your hand. So again, you're getting more value out of this, you're getting cards to hand which are recurring the cost of Ninja and the cards you've played. So you're breaking 2 things and you are getting cards to hand and you're increasing your forwards. So pretty good. Kane and Nidhogg. So Kane can obviously reduce his value by quite a bit, but when cards refer to the costs of other cards, it is the printed value. So even though Kane's cost can go down by 5, he's still an 8 CP forward, so that's good. And what's also good is that Kane can break a backup to then again make room for Ninja. So even if you're on 5 backups, you can be like, well, I'm just going to put this one on the break zone, maybe something like Fusoya to be able to get another forward back to hand. And yeah, you've played Kane for 3, hopefully kill something with his entry effect, and then you play Ninja, you bounce Kane back to hand to play Nidhogg, you break something else, you make your opponent discard as well, and I really like Nidhogg because your opponent doesn't get to choose what they discard, and that sort of chaos can really throw off someone's game. And then if you really wanted to, you can play Kane again to break a 3rd thing. And finally, Faris, so a water, fire, multi-element card. When Faris or a job warrior of light forward enters the field, select one of the 2 following actions. Choose one forward, deal it 2000 damage for each job warrior of light forward you control. Or during this turn, the cost required to cast your next job warrior of light is reduced by 2, it cannot become 0. So she's got some really good effects. Aegis, again another Opus 12 card. You play Aegis and then you can play Faris onto the field. What's good is that Faris triggers herself, so then you can reduce the cost of another warrior light you might want to play onto the field. You can use Faris so that maybe the cost of Aegis was reduced, because paying 3 for him to then bring in 2 forwards is awesome. Or maybe just Aegis comes in, Faris comes in, and that is a 4k ping with her other ability. Maybe you had a few other warrior lights on the field. It's just warrior lights this set have really got the amazing ability to just swarm the field, and Aegis is a great card to work that with. Arc, so a similar sort of thing, but what's good is that Arc gets to reactivate Job Warrior Light as well, and if you're on 3 damage, you can also play a Warrior of Light of 3 or less onto the field, so you can maybe make Arc cost less through Faris's ability, and then he plays 3, or he costs 3 even. You can reactivate those 3 backups you used to dull him. He can then bring in something else, which then could receive a fire ping from Faris. So there's just so many different things you can do with Arc. Dusk, so Dusk, when he enters the field, you may pay 1 water. When you do so, play 1 forward of +3 on from your hand onto the field. Oh my god, I can't speak, sorry. So you can make Dusk cost 1 from Faris' ability, and with that additional water CP, effectively costs 2, but that's for the other forward as well, so really you've paid 1 CP for 2 separate 3-cost forwards, which can then, if they're both Warrior Lights, deal damage based on Faris' abilities. So there's just so much going on here, but again, really good value abilities. Now, if you combine this all together, you can use Arc, or this works with Aegis as well, but I went with Arc just because I like the fact that he can reactivate things as well. You can play Arc, to then play Dusk, to then play Warrior of Light. There's just, wow, so many things going on here. So Arc comes in, he reactivates stuff, he can then play Dusk, Dusk enters the field, you can then pay 1 water then to bring in Warrior of Light. And every single one of these triggers Faris. So maybe you played Faris onto the field, she makes Arc cost 3, play Arc onto the field, deal 4k to something, Dusk enters the field, you then deal 4k to something else, no, then it will be a 6k to something else, and then Warrior of Light enters the field, and you can deal a 8k to something else, or you can reduce the cost of another forward, or another Warrior Light onto the field. So wow, like I said earlier, you can also replace Arc with Aegis to be able to play an even higher cost forward, but still, this is just a funny play that I think is super value. Wall. So Wall's good, he could be played off of Aegis, but what's also decent about him is the fact that he gets you, hopefully, if you've got a lot of Warrior's Light in your deck, which you should do, he'll get you a card back to hand, so he costs even less. So if you made him cost 2 less off Faris, and he recurs a card back to your hand, or sorry, gets you a card out of your deck to hand, he's basically free. But when he also leaves the field, or sorry, when he goes to the break zone, he can then play a 3-cost forward onto the field. Another 3-cost Warrior Light even, so then that's dealing more damage, and wow, there is just so much synergy with these walls, it's crazy. And finally, Refia. Wouldn't be able to do all this without mentioning Refia, because when she attacks you get to remove stuff, and as you've seen in this little segment, they can really swarm the field together. So yeah, the fact that she enters the field and she can also play a forward onto the field as well, that's just crazy. There we have it, folks. I hope you enjoyed the video. As I mentioned before, please do subscribe and like the video if you did like it. It means a lot to me, and who knows, maybe I'll do more competitions in the future as well. I had a lot of fun doing one recently, and if we keep this trainer rolling, who knows what the prizes might be. Alright, I'll see you in the next video.